Hi, I'm Jeremy, the Zoo Nerd. Today we're going to be talking about a very misunderstood group of animals called the hyenas. Now, hyenas have long fascinated people and confused people, including scientists. For many years, scientists wondered, are they dogs? Are they cats? Are they dogs? Are they cats? And the answer is they're not either. They belong to their own family of animals called Hyenidae. Their closest relatives are actually things in the mongoose family, so think something like a meerkat, but definitely on steroids comparatively. There are 4 different species of hyenas. So those are spotted, striped, brown, and the aardwolf. Most of the information we have and that I'm going to be talking about today is going to be about the spotted hyenas. Those are the biggest, those are the most numerous, and they're the most well documented by science. They are the typical hyena that you may see or think of from movies. They are also sometimes called the laughing hyena because of some of the vocalizations that they make. I am going to talk about all 4 species a little bit, but most of the focus will be on the spotted hyena. If you saw the photos that I put up earlier on the Facebook or the Instagram, those were spotted hyenas that are in a zoo. Those were taken at the Berlin Tierpark Zoo in East Berlin back in 2016 when I visited there. I have seen spotted hyenas out in the wild in Africa, in 2 different places in Kenya. I've heard them. Their noises are amazing, a little bit frightening, and can carry up to a long distance. I've also seen 3 of the 4 species in zoo settings, with the brown hyena being the species I have not yet seen. Someday that will change, and I look forward to that time. But in speaking of spotted hyenas, like I said, they are the largest. They can weigh up to close to 200 pounds, with a big female being the biggest, which is a bit different from most mammal species. Usually the males are the bigger species, but not so with spotted hyenas. Females are the largest. Females are the boss when it comes to spotted hyena culture. They can live into their early 20s, both out in the wild and in a zoo setting. Although a 20-year-old hyena in the wild would have had a very long and successful life, and albeit a very hard life. They have pretty rough way of living. But a hyena that would make it to that age out in the wild would be very successful and surrounded by a lot of other hyenas who would make that hyena very successful as well. Now, hyenas are generally thought of to be scavengers, and that is true with the brown hyenas. They are mostly scavengers, but it's not quite true with the others. Specifically with the spotted hyena, it's not true at all. They actually kill about 95% of the food that they eat, so they are definitely predators. In fact, in most areas, they found that lions typically steal food more so from hyenas than the other way around. Hyenas typically make a lot of the kills, and lions will sometimes steal the food from the hyenas. Like I mentioned earlier, the females are the boss. The females are in control in a spotted hyena family. And that family can be huge. That family group is called a clan, and the female in charge may have up to 100 individuals kind of relying on her leadership. Now, they'll sometimes live in smaller groups, but occupy a huge territory together with up to 100 individuals being in that territory. And they would all come together if there's something huge that is killed that they want to eat, or if they have a big turf war with, say, the neighbor hyenas, or possibly a big pride of lions or other predator. Hyenas are highly intelligent. They also have an extreme range of vocal communication. Scientists have identified over 11 different sounds for the spotted hyenas. They are the ones that typically are called laughing hyenas, which I thought was maybe appropriate since today's April Fool's Day, and we maybe want to be a little more lighthearted and laugh a little. Their main sound that you hear is kind of called a whoop sound. It goes whoop, whoop, whoop. That sound can be heard from about 3 miles away. I definitely heard it in the evening in Africa, in Kenya when I was there. There was a night we were driving back to camp, and we could hear hyenas all around us making that sound. So we would hear one over here, and then we'd hear one over here, then we'd hear one out in front of us. And within a few short minutes, we actually saw hyenas darting around in front of our truck as we drove. Now, hyenas are generally nocturnal, so they're usually more active during the nighttime, but they will definitely start waking up about an hour before sunset, looking for their next meal. Their sounds, like I said, can carry up to 3 miles away, so very important for them to have vocal communication amongst the spotted hyenas. They also have extremely good digestive tract, starting with really big, strong jaws. They have been measured to have the strongest jaw strength of any mammal, which is pretty phenomenal because there are a lot of mammals that are quite a bit bigger than them, but the hyenas have the strongest jaw strength. They're able to crush bones with their big teeth in their back, their molars. Really excellent at crushing bones. They will often eat and digest the bones. They will actually eat the horns and the hoofs and the hair of most of the animals that they're eating as well. They have very complex social structures. Scientists have called their social structure a fission-fusion group. That means that there's a big group of them that kind of all function together when a big number is needed, but they will also break off into smaller groups and coordinate with each other. They typically do this for hunting strategies and for denning. So there might be a little den site here with one female and maybe her sister and their cubs. And then over here, there's 2 or 3 other sisters and their cubs, and over here, another group. And then they'll each go hunting in their little separate groups. And then when they kill something, they'll communicate to each other that there is food, and all of those groups come together to eat, with the females eating first, all the females lower ranking eating second, the cubs eating third, and any males in the group actually eat last in hyena culture. They also have excellent senses, really good sense of hearing, and really amazing eyesight for the spotted hyenas. Those are both very important as they're a very social group and they communicate over far distances. They need good eyes, they need good hearing. When I was in Kenya, we were having a little celebration where we were watching the sun go down and having some snacks out on the savannah. Beautiful overview of the plains. And as we were standing around talking, I noticed there was an animal walking, and it kept getting closer and closer to us. And when it was close enough that I could distinguish what I pointed it out to my friend and then to our guide. I said, "Isn't this a hyena that's coming towards us?" And as soon as the guide noticed that that's what was the case, the guide said, "Okay, everybody in the trucks," and we got in the trucks. Hyenas don't generally attack people, but they are capable of doing so. And we certainly wouldn't have want to have been injured or threatened by the hyenas. So back in the trucks we went to drive home. One thing that I think is very interesting about hyenas, since they do eat a lot of bones, and that's a lot of calcium in their bones, their poop is actually white shortly after they poop because of the high amount of calcium in their bones, which is pretty crazy, but you can definitely see it as you're driving along in Africa. You see a pile of white, big poops. Those are going to be hyena poops. Moving on to talk about the striped hyenas. As their names depict, the spotted hyenas are kind of yellow with spots. Striped hyenas are kind of white with black stripes. They live in a different place. They live in northern Africa and then the Middle East and over into India. So they actually cover parts of Asia as well. And they're quite a bit smaller. And the males in the striped hyena species are actually a bit bigger than the females. So they're about 90 pounds. Females top out about 75 pounds. They're the least studied of all hyenas, so they're the ones we don't know the most about. They live in small family groups, so usually a mated pair and their cubs, and maybe their cubs from the previous year. Sometimes a brother or sister of one of the adults will be in that group as well. They communicate mostly through body language. Vocally, they're kind of very quiet as hyenas go, especially compared to their noisy spotted cousins. The striped hyenas are quite quiet. They really use things like their tails and their ears in different positions to dictate or communicate with each other how they're feeling and what's going on. They also have the capability, they have really long hair right on the back of their neck, and they can make that stand up really straight and tall. And when they do that, they almost look double in size, and they use that to help protect themselves from any predators or to threaten anything that they need to scare off and say, hey, look at me, I'm a big guy, leave me alone. The striped hyenas do have one important vocalization that is described as being a howl. I have not heard it, so I won't try to impersonate it for you, but they use that howl to communicate over further distances. Moving on and talking about the brown hyenas, these guys have really scruffy long hair. They are typically very brown in color, and they live in the southwest portion of Africa. So that's in a lot of the desert area of southern Africa, the Kalahari and the Namib deserts, including the beaches. They've often seen these hyenas wandering along what is called the skeleton coast, where a lot of things from the ocean tend to wash up because of the current, and they will sometimes scavenge on those things. So things like shipwrecks or dead animals from the ocean that wash up, these hyenas will sometimes scavenge those. And the brown hyenas are definitely more scavengers than the other species. They have very scruffy hair, very pointy ears, and they top out about 100 pounds. So they're actually the second largest of the different hyena species. They have excellent sense of smell, is the most important for them. And as a scavenger, that would be very important to kind of find some of their food, especially anything that's a little rotten or stinky would be very smelly. They den communally, but they sometimes forage on their own. So they live in a family group, but then they kind of go different ways at night to find their food. One thing that I found out about the brown hyenas that I thought was really interesting is that one of the things that they really love to eat are melons. Living in a desert, they sometimes struggle to find a good water source, so eating something like a melon would be very good for their water or fluid intakes. And they're actually considered a very important seed disperser for 3 different kinds of melons that live in those deserts, which is really interesting. You think of this carnivore scavenger animal, but it also really enjoys melons. And yeah, so that's the brown hyena living in southwestern Africa. The last species we're going to talk about today is called the aardwolf. And aardwolves are by far the smallest. They weigh about 20 or 30 pounds. So that's very small compared to the others. And they are striped, so they kind of look like a striped hyena a bit, but they're about 1/3 of their size. And these guys live in southeastern Africa, South and Eastern Africa, and they are exclusively insectivores or bug eaters. They have a really long, sticky tongue, and they will use that to kind of stick into termite mounds and eat the termites out of their mounds. They specialize in eating insects. They will sometimes eat other kinds of bugs or maybe some small animals that they find, but most of their diet is termites. Specifically, they can eat 300,000 termites in a night. So that's a lot of bugs. And they're very important for their ecosystem and kind of keeping those termite populations in check, because termites can be very destructive if they get out of hand and if their colonies get too big. Aardwolves are very particular in how they eat the termites. They know that those big tall termite mounds, which you may have seen, they kind of look like sandy rock that's turned hard. They don't tear into the termite mound like some other animals that eat termites do, because they know that that's their food source. So they eat as many termites as they can, and then they'll come back to that termite mound or colony in a couple of weeks when the termites have kind of repopulated that. So they kind of keep a mental checklist of where the termites are and which mound they go to on which night. They are largely solitary, so they're usually out alone, although they will den together as a pair, or a mom, if she has her cubs, they will stay together in a little group. They can live about 14 years old. So some things that are kind of common with all these hyena species is that they are largely nocturnal. So they are very active at nighttime. If you've ever seen a hyena in a zoo setting, you may have seen them being kind of sleepy. They're often asleep during the daytime and more active at night. They would definitely also fluctuate a little bit depending on the time of the year and the weather. If the nights are very cold, they may be switching to a more crepuscular activity. So that's where they're active more at the dawn and the dusk. That way they have some of the warmth of the sun. And I did see some hyenas in the daytime in Africa as well. They were ones who made a kill right around sunrise and were still eating and hooping and hollering, running around as the sun was coming up, as it was getting daytime. Hyenas also have very peculiar way of walking or running. Their front limbs, their front arms are a lot longer than their back ones. That gives them a very hunched back shape, which kind of gives them a very odd physical view. If you look at them from the side, they look kind of funny. And when they run kind of funny. But it's actually physiologists, or people who study how bodies move and work, have determined that their shape actually helps them to be able to run very fast for an extended period of time. And with the spotted hyenas, again, they're the most well documented. They've known that they can run about 37 miles an hour for extended distances, which is pretty impressive speed for a carnivore. For something that may be trying to eat something like an antelope, they're pretty good at running them down. And since those spotted hyenas also hunt as a group, that would be very successful for their hunting strategies. And they're capable of taking down things much, much larger than they are when they hunt together. I hope you've enjoyed what we've shared today about hyenas. Oh, one other thing I did want to mention, that all hyena species are considered near threatened, so none of them are endangered, which is great news. There's not a lot of animals we can say that about. There are places where they are persecuted by humans. Sometimes they view them as pests for their flocks if they're raising goats or sheep or cows. Or also if they grow gardens, some of the hyenas will sometimes steal fruit. I read that the striped hyenas sometimes love to eat peaches, which is kind of funny. And then of course those brown hyenas love to eat melons, so they will sometimes steal food from people's gardens as well. People sometimes feel that hyenas are pretty scary, so they will sometimes shoot at them or poison them, and people are always not fully informed of what they do, unfortunately. But it is good news that they are not endangered. There are hyenas in big portions of the world, or throughout Africa and throughout the Middle East and Asia for the striped hyenas, and that is good news, because more animals, more diversity, that is an important thing. So I hope you've enjoyed what we've shared today about hyenas. I'll be putting up some really great information on the Facebook profile later on today, so check that out. And until tomorrow, enjoy, stay safe, take care of yourself, and have fun. Feel free to like, follow, subscribe, and share across all three platforms: Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Thank you. Goodbye. See you tomorrow.